Hey, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of What's Happening in the Chaska Middle School West Band program for the week of April 1st, 2018. Happy Easter, everybody. This week's podcast is different in that I am speaking directly to the students at St. Cloud State who are going to be visiting our music program on Friday, April 6th. And I wanted to answer some questions for them before they come on out so they know what to expect. And for those of you not part of that, if you're listening, if you want to find out what's happening this coming week, go back and listen to the last podcast that I did back on March 23rd, or you can simply listen and maybe find out a little bit about the program that you are involved in and find out what we're doing more specifically and philosophically. So you have a list of questions here that was sent to me, so I'm just going to answer those questions. And so here we go. So starting out with, how long have you been teaching at Chaska Middle School West? This is my 21st year at West, and that's where I started teaching. I have been in the same district and virtually in the same school all 21 years. There's a couple different years where I traveled over to one of the other middle schools in our district, but every year I've been at West either part-time or full-time. Most of those years it's been full-time all at West. Second of all, as far as my own music background, my primary instrument is the trombone. I started playing trombone in fifth grade and have played throughout to this day. In addition to teaching, I really consider my performing as a very vital part to what makes me a better teacher. When I get a chance to perform, I learn more about playing my instrument and therefore can teach more to my students. So I try to do some playing outside of my teaching, and I do a variety of things from playing in big bands to church worship to rock bands, top 40 horn bands, that kind of thing. Brass quintet, chamber ensemble music, orchestral stuff, concert band. So a variety of different venues and genres. I also am a guitarist, and I started playing guitar right after I finished my undergrad and self-taught primarily. And one reason I picked up guitar was because I was really interested in music that was guitar driven and wanted to be able to play it. And then second of all, because it was actually one instrument that I really wanted to learn that I didn't get a chance to learn through my undergrad. So it was just a great instrument to pick up. I play mostly acoustic, a little bit of electric, and I play in church worship settings primarily with guitar. Even though I'm still mostly a trombone player, I do some worship sessions, like once a month I lead worship on guitar. So those are my two main instruments. And as far as other instruments that I play, nothing else that I would play professionally, outside of maybe euphonium and maybe a little tuba, but and then some singing. But that's pretty much it. I can kind of fake my way around a bass guitar a little bit, but that's about it. And then some non-traditional offerings that we offer, and then how we got started. I'll try to make this somewhat brief, but also give you what you want to know. So back in, I believe the year was 2003, my wife, who's also a music teacher and a musician, pianist and vocalist and violinist, we went to see the movie School of Rock, which is this movie about a guy who has a roommate who's a substitute teacher, and one day pretends to be his roommate when he takes a call for a long-term sub job and ends up taking it and pretends to be his roommate and subs long-term for this fifth grade class at this private school. And basically he turns the class into a rock band because that's what he is. He's a rocker. And so he gives all the kids a job, whether that's an instrument to play, they're singing, they're marketing, they're in publicity, they're designing outfits, they're doing the lights and sound, whatever it is. And that's kind of the premise of the movie, and it's an awesomely fun movie. And we all left the movie, and everyone's like, "Oh, that was so cute." But my wife and I looked at each other, and we're like, "We are going to do that." And so, literally within the month, we had posted through our community ed department a class called School of Rock, which was basically described in some way like this: that this is for anybody who wants to be in a rock band, regardless of ability, what instrument you play. This is your opportunity to come on in. We'll teach you some technique, we'll teach you some history, we'll teach you some tunes, and we'll jam. And we didn't really know what to expect, but we got about 20 plus kids that came that first time, and we were a little bit overwhelmed. We didn't have the gear, we didn't have the space, we didn't have enough people to teach them all. So we had to act pretty quickly on the fly to make that class work. But I think the number one thing we noticed is that we had hit a nerve, and we had found that this is something that kids wanted to do, and it was something that was not being offered through our traditional music program that most schools have. And so quickly after that, one other thing that we noticed is that it was hard to teach kids all at different varying ability levels. Kids who had been studying piano or guitar since first grade, and then kids who had never played any instrument ever. And so we kind of developed the School of Rock into more of a survey intro class where kids got a chance to try things like drum set guitar, bass guitar, keyboards, singing. But then there was a more advanced class that we called Garage Band, which we started the next year. And this was a performance-based group that was kind of designed like you would run a jazz band, in the sense that you would learn 3 or 4 songs. You would learn all the technique and the style of those kind of music. We learned improvisation. We would learn history. We learned about form, some theory, technique, all the things that would go into becoming great rock musicians. And then we would perform, and we'd try to find a couple venues to perform. And so we were offering both then, the Garage Band and then the School of Rock class. And we were running all of these through community education, which basically in our district runs all middle school activities, whether we're talking athletics, music, theater, art classes, whatever it may be. In the middle schools in our district, that is run through community ed. And so students have to pay a fee to be involved, but it's not a very big fee. It's usually somewhere between $50 and $100 for a class that might run for like anywhere from 6 to 12 sessions for an hour. And all the classes that I offer are 1 hour or around there after school once a week for a season. And a season being usually around 3 months, sometimes a little shorter, sometimes a little longer. And so that allows me to offer kids a number of different experiences, and I'll get to some of the other ones here in just a minute. But it also allows the kids to be involved, but still be involved in other things. So for example, if a student is a basketball player and plays traveling basketball in the winter and has a very full schedule due to that, which if you are familiar with traveling basketball, it's a lot of your time, they're still able to take that hour a week and be in Garage Band or be in Jazz Band, and they're not having to make a choice. And one of my big philosophies as a middle school teacher is that students should have the opportunity to be involved in many activities at this age, and shouldn't have to be making decisions on what one sport do they want to play for the rest of their lives. What, are they going to be in music? Are they going to be in art? Are they going to be in theater? They should be able to do as many of those as they can within reason at that age. So that's how I offer them, once a week for an hour, hour and a half for a season, like 2, 3, 4 months, and then we move on to something else. So getting back to the classes I offer, I'm not going to drag this out much longer. There's a lot of really cool stories that go with all these groups, but after Garage Band, we formed a beginning guitar class for both students and adults, and we've even dabbled in the intermediate guitar classes too. Had a sixth grader come up to me shortly after the Garage Band started and said he wanted to be in it. When I asked him what instrument he wanted to play, he said the banjo. I said, "You play the banjo?" He's like, "Yeah, I've been playing it for years." And I was like, "Wow, I didn't know 6th graders played banjo." And I asked him what kind of music he played, and he's like, "Bluegrass, duh." Well, I'm like, I didn't know much about bluegrass music, but I said to him, "Why don't we form a bluegrass ensemble?" And so before you know it, we had a bluegrass band, and that became the country bluegrass band that played a combination of traditional bluegrass and contemporary country music. And that's now become a thing, and that's going strong. And then other groups that have come off of that, we have the hip-hop group, we have the pop ensemble, we have the DJs, we have a mariachi band, which sometimes becomes a contemporary Latin/mariachi band. We have a movie band, which is basically a concert band that plays all movie themes. We have a music technology/music production class. And then we have the typical stuff. We have a jazz band, we have jazz combo, we have honor band, and we have marching band. And so now, here we are about 15 years after we started School of Rock, and it kind of runs like this. If I can just give you a brief overview. So in the fall, the classes that are offered are marching band, which marches just in our two homecoming parades in our district in the fall. And then we have School of Rock in the fall. And then we have what am I missing? Oh, the beginning guitar class is in the fall. And then our hip hop and DJ class are also in the fall. And so those all meet once a week after school, and you can see how, it's 4 or 5 days a week after school. Every day is a different class. So students can actually be in more than one if they want, and it's no problem. It's not a huge commitment to be in 2 or 3 of those things in a season. And then when the winter hits, we start our jazz bands, and we have a jazz band at each grade level, 6, 7, and 8, so 3 jazz bands. We have our jazz combo, which kind of doubles as like a jazz/pop combo. That group actually meets all year, and they meet before school once a week. That's kind of my all-star group. That's just 8th graders. And the jazz bands do your typical things. They do a couple concerts in the community. They also do a couple jazz festivals. One is in our community. One's up in Duluth. Sometimes we go out to Eau Claire or the University of Minnesota. So typical jazz program. Also in the winter then we have our garage bands, and we are up now to 3 garage bands. We audition for those groups, and they do 4 concerts during the course of the year. And we also have our country bluegrass band that meets in the winter, and there's one of those, and that also meets and does about 3 or 4 performances during the winter. And I should also mention that the garage band program has grown so much that we now have 2 high school garage bands that are also outside of the school day for high school students. And sometimes we combine all 5 groups together to play a venue. So it's really cool to have seen that program grow from 20 plus kids in a school rock class, and now we have, if you combine school rock, middle school garage bands, high school garage band, country bluegrass band, probably about 75 kids in that program. And another thing I should add, and I think this was another question that St. Cloud wanted to know, is that not all those kids are in our traditional band and choir program. I would say probably of those 75 kids, at least 25 of those kids, at least initially, or when they first start in this program, are not in the band, choir, or orchestra. What I mean by when they initially start is a lot of times, in fact, I would say more often than not, these kids that participate in these groups oftentimes then decide they want to be in the band or the choir or the orchestra or more than one. So kids are realizing how much they love music, and so it's really cool to see these kids then become part of the traditional program as well as the rock and country program. So those are the classes we offer in the winter, and then when the spring hits, so like right about now, we are switching over to the mariachi band and the pop ensemble and the honor bands, and we have 2 honor bands district-wide because we don't have ability-based bands in middle school, so this is a chance for kids who are really motivated to participate in a higher level band. So we have those groups that perform. The mariachi band usually performs around Cinco de Mayo, and then our pop ensemble will do a performance as well. So those groups are all meeting. By the way, the pop ensemble is like all music from like the last 2 years. So like we're going to be doing Havana by Camila Cabello, and we're going to be doing What About Us by Pink, and what else? A Charlie Puth song. So we'll have a variety of things that are pretty popular, and we'll use technology pretty similar to what they use in pop music today. And then finally, we get to the summer session. And the summer session, we also continue to meet once a week for like an hour a week with each group. And the groups that we offer in the summer are the jazz band, the marching band, the movie band, the music technology class, and then beginning guitar, the Latin mariachi band, high school and middle school garage band, and country bluegrass band. And we can offer more in the summer because I'm not teaching my regular traditional school classes, of course. So there's a little more opportunity to meet more often with those groups. So, or have more groups meet at the same time, I should say. So that's kind of our schedule. And I guess when you look at all that now, it seems overwhelming. But I didn't start them all the same year. It was kind of staggered, and then they don't all meet at the same time, except for in the summer. A lot of them meet, but it's doable. It's very doable. So the next question was, do you find your music program is attracting more students than students interested in band instruments? And so I already kind of addressed that. So yes, definitely. And I think it's interesting because it's not necessarily the number one reason I wanted to start this. I think maybe the number one reason was seeing a need of students, regardless if they were in music, wanting to do this kind of music. And given that the music that we're studying here is very relevant and for these kids, but also in the music industry as a whole. And I think part of being a music educator is to educate students about not just music of the classical and romantic eras or the jazz era, even though that's extremely important. And I think being a good classically trained musician is awesome. Um, but I think you have some kids that they really want to learn this music, whether they are also interested in being classically trained or maybe they have no interest in that at all. And so as I started doing this, I realized how many of those kids we were getting that were not interested in singing in the school choir or playing the trumpet or playing the violin, and noticed how good that was. That here's a student that might be sitting in their basement with their computer on GarageBand or Logic, just creating song after song after song, and teaching themselves, and probably teaching themselves some good stuff, but also probably some pretty bad habits, and probably taking a really long time to figure stuff out. Whereas if they can come into a program like this, and I can sit down with them and say, okay, uh, let's combine our knowledge here. You probably know a lot about the software, the digital audio workstation that you're using, and that's awesome. And you could probably teach me some stuff, which is great. I love that. But at the same time, I can teach you some things about music and how this music works. And so you don't have to always be doing trial and error. You can learn some things about some music theory, form, instruments, and learn about how all this works so that you can be like, oh, okay, I got that really quickly instead of taking, weeks to figure that out because I just couldn't get it to work. So I think it's kind of cool how it's a kind of a two-way street between student and teacher and how that works. Um, so yeah, so that's really cool. So it's cool to see kids getting into the program who aren't in the traditional program and getting them more of a structured music education, even though it's in a non-traditional area, and I think that's great. And it's also great for the kids who love playing in the band, singing in the choir, playing the orchestra, to continue building their musical knowledge by playing in these groups. I have many kids who play in my concert band who are also playing in the jazz band and the honor band and the marching band and the garage band and now the pop ensemble and the mariachi band. They want to do it all and experience all this. And how great is that for them to have all this experience before basically they're into their teenage years. So it's really neat. So there's one more question here. What do you like about the music program the way it is now, and what are your hopes for the future? And I think the thing I really like about it right now is that we have so many options, and that the kids can find areas that they're interested in or that they fit. Um, I like how they can find network with other kids who have the same interests as them. It's really fun when you watch these kids, 3, 4 years after I have them, they've formed their own bands. They're doing their own thing. And then even looking further ahead, I have some students that were in garage band 10, 12 years ago now who are, running their own recording studios, who are performing professionally. And, when they come back and they say, you know, it all started in garage band, I'm not naive enough to think that they probably wouldn't be where they would be without GarageBand. But at the same time, maybe that helped them springboard a little bit faster and help them notice their passion. And then who knows, maybe they wouldn't have gone into music. But um, I think that's really cool to see how that has now blossomed into what students are doing now. So I can tell these students that I have currently that, hey, this can really lead to something, what you're doing. If you continue on this path, I can give you example A, B, and C of all these students who have gone down the path you are starting, and look what they're doing now. It's pretty darn cool. So I love that about our program. I also love how, I was talking to, this is many years ago now, I used to play with a saxophone player in a jazz band here in the Twin Cities. And he was retired, and he had started teaching here in the cities quite some time ago, and was one of the first music teachers to start a jazz band. And many people criticized him and said, "How could you be teaching jazz band? You know, this is probably in the 1950s. How could you be teaching jazz band as part of your music program?" And he was telling me when I was telling him about all these groups that I'm doing, he's like, "Don't don't fall into that trap. There's just too many people who think that there's this is the only way to do it, and there's more than one way to do this thing, and you're seeing it. You're seeing it in what your kids are doing." And so I think that is what I love, that kids have an opportunity here to be in a very rigorous, relevant, and rewarding program. And you can see it all over their face every time they perform, anytime they're in those classes. So that is really cool. And as far as my hopes for the future, I think number one, I just want to see things continue and see things continue to grow and kids to continue being involved. I think another thing is I'd like to make sure it doesn't get bigger than me. I think sometimes I do feel like I have swam into the deep end and I'm having a hard time, managing a little bit. So I need to be smart in my decisions on what I decide to do and not do. Um, I'll give you an example of that. A lot of the stuff I do has now found its way into the band program. And so, for example, I have chamber ensembles that are like typical, flute quartets, brass quintets, and things like that. But I also have ensembles that involve, drummers and bass players and keyboard players and guitarists, and we're doing songs from Broadway shows or songs from movies or pop songs. So we're doing a variety of things like that. We're making music videos, we're doing recordings, we're coming up with kind of outside the box ways to perform this music for the community. So it's pretty cool. I'm doing these things called bonus lessons now, where kids, instead of coming to a flute lesson, for example, can come to a songwriting lesson or an improvisation lesson or a production lesson and learn about those aspects of music. So some of that gets to be a lot because you have to prepare for all that every week in addition to just preparing your regular lessons with the kids on trumpet and saxophone and etc. So it is a challenge in that sense. So I got to be careful there. And I think one last thing that I would love to see our program do. I'm really impressed in a school where there is no music requirements. We have kids don't have to be in any music class after fifth grade, which is crazy. But in our school of about 750, there's, I would say, 550 or so kids in band, choir, or orchestra, or more than one of those during the course of the school year. So, what is that? That's like about 70% maybe of our students are in a music class when there is no music required. And I'd love to see that continue. It would be great if it was 100%. I would love to see some of these classes I do become part of the school day, and we've gotten a little bit of that. I'd love to see some of it become part of the high school day as well, and that's something we're pushing for a little bit. And I would just love to see that overall kind of attitude towards music change, and I think it has quite a bit in our district. I mean, it's always been good, I think, since I've been here, but I think people really support music, but there's still that stereotype of taking music there where some people think it's not important. Um, Parents think that. I think sometimes students give music a reputation that, only the geeks do that, or that's a nerdy thing to do, or if you want to be cool, you can't do music. I'm not going to do music in high school because I want to sit in the home in the student section of the football game for those 5 games, and I might look like a geek with my marching band uniform on. I think some of that mentality, which drives me nuts, and it really baffles me that it's not so much students think that, but that parents think that. Um, but I think especially students we need to get rid of that mentality. So that's something that's been on my mind lately too. So and I'm not quite sure how to go about that other than just to continue doing what we're doing and providing so many opportunities and to focus on the kids who are really benefiting from this program, which I said is like 70% of the school. So that's awesome, and I don't think we have any shame in that, and we should be very proud of that. So there you go. So that's probably a lot more than you need to know. I'm looking at the time here, and if you've watched this whole video, that's really cool. So thanks for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to seeing the students from St. Cloud State on Friday. and you can see some of these things in action. You'll get to see some of the stuff we do in concert band as well. We have bonus lessons on Friday, so you'll get to see some of those lessons I talked about. And it's our first day of pop ensemble on Friday, so that'll be really cool. You'll be part of history in the making, so to speak, at Chaska Middle School West. So if you need to get a hold of me, my email is songer@district112.org. That's Songer, my last name, Songer, then an E, at district112.org. And you can also follow me on Twitter at CMSWBand or at Songer Studio. And the YouTube site is Mr. Songer's channel. And my website is www.songerstudio.com. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back to our regular What's Happening in the CMSW Weekly podcast next week. And we'll have a lot to talk about with the honor band starting, pop ensemble starting, our guest speaker Ian Allison coming in, and then Solon Ensemble coming up, 6th grade jazz band concert coming up, our overnight Eau Claire trip for the rhythm section, and also state honor band. So lots of fun stuff coming up that we'll talk about in the next podcast. So thanks for tuning in.